You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I am Dustin, I'm joined with my host Tony, and today we are diving into our next current state of, and this time around we are talking about the next streaming service that we'll be launching. This one is coming on November 12th, and it is Disney+. Now, when you say the name Disney, you automatically associate that with a lot of different things. You could be associating it with theme parks. You could be associating it with classic animated films. You could, as Tony said, you could associate with the mouse himself, Mickey Mouse. There's a lot of different things that the word Disney will remind people of. And come November 12th, there will be a service dedicated to the majority of those things that you associate Disney with. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of where Disney Plus came from, how it is going to launch, how it's going to compete in the market, and what is the current state of Disney Plus. So the first thing, let's just talk about it. Disney Plus obviously is owned by the Walt Disney Company, which has been around since 1923. It's the company on this list so far that we've covered that's been around the longest. And it originally obviously was an animation company and became a much larger company that deals with a lot of other things because, let's be honest, Disney is involved in lots and lots of things. The good core amount of money that they make comes from merchandising, which deals with a lot with their original creations that they've created over the years. Disney princesses, Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh. While they don't have some of the things that are super popular, like the princesses and Winnie the Pooh, obviously were created by other people. Disney owns the rights to those characters, and they make a ridiculous amount of money within the theme parks, within merchandise that you can find practically anywhere. They make a lot of money, but they also make a lot of films, and they, over the past 15 years, have acquired a number of smaller, not very small, but smaller companies, and the smaller in the sense of smaller than Disney. To put in perspective, Disney is currently, their assets are worth over $98 billion. Stock price is sitting at around $130 currently per share, so less than the last couple companies that we talked about, but still very, very high up there as far as an asset count. But over the past 15 years, Disney has added a number of different companies to their lineup, per se. They've acquired a lot of companies. It started in the early 2000s. They acquired Pixar. They acquired the Muppets from the Jim Henson Company. They acquired Marvel in 2009. They acquired Lucasfilm in 2011. They've been acquiring a lot of companies, and most recently they've acquired 20th Century Fox and a whole lot of what used to be 20th Century Fox as a whole. They now have The Simpsons. They have basically all the movies that 20th Century Fox has ever created. They own the rights to those. Disney has a lot of content to offer, essentially. And if you don't live under a rock, you've probably seen at least one or two Disney movies in the last couple of years that are newer, because the Disney produces a lot of movies. And just this year alone, out of, I believe, the top 10 movies as far as the box office take for the year, Disney, I think, has 7 or 8 of the top 10 movies, with a bunch of movies over $1 billion, coming from a lot of these companies that they've acquired. Pixar, they'll have Star Wars coming up in December. They have Marvel films that have made over $1 billion, 2 of them. They have Toy Story 4 with Pixar. There's a lot of movies that have released this year outside of just their core stuff. Obviously, they have the live action films as well with Lion King, and earlier this year they had Dumbo, and then they have their animated films as well. We have Frozen 2 coming in November. So, needless to say, Disney is a behemoth when it comes to content. They are not hurting for content in any way, shape, or form. They've been making content for over 80 years, and they have a lot of content they have the rights to a lot of content. Disney is also one of the companies out there that is very smart about being very careful where they license it to, how often they offer their products. You may not be familiar if you are not a hardcore Disney fan or you haven't purchased a lot of Disney films, but there was a big thing that started in the 80s with the releases of VHSs where Disney introduced the Disney Vault. And the Disney Vault was them releasing a film for a certain amount of time, and then they'd put it back in the vault, which basically meant they'd pull the copies off the shelves, and you could no longer buy the film for at least 5 to 10 years in some cases. And it made their products more sought after when they would re-release their films. They did it again with the DVDs and Blu-rays, and they've done it again. They've actually had a couple different versions of the Blu-rays that have released. But over the years, they've also been very careful about licensing their content to other cable stations. Most of the time, their content will appear on the Disney Channel or their own subsidiaries like ABC or the ABC, the cable channels that they also own. But they've been very careful about it, and I'd say roughly 10 years ago, they had a licensing deal with Starz where a lot of the new releases were popping up on Starz as they were releasing. And once that deal ended, they actually got into, they made a deal with Netflix. And Netflix was actually the streaming service that had the licensing rights to a lot of the Disney stuff. And for a really long time, if you wanted to see a new Disney film, about 3 months after it would release on DVD, it would pop up on Netflix. And that deal expired, and once that deal expired, Disney announced that they had every intention of starting their own service. And that brings us to Disney Plus. So, before we get really, really in depth, and I know I probably have already gone more in depth than some of the other companies, another disclaimer. So, for the last 3 years, I've been extremely interested in Disney as a company and been following it pretty closely with the decisions that they've made. In full disclosure, I go to the Disney parks. This year I've been to Disneyland and Disney World, and I tend to enjoy going to the parks. I try to go to the parks at least once a year, even though I don't live in the vicinity of those parks. So I'm a pretty big Disney fan. I belong to D23, the Disney fan club. And in general, I am a Disney fan. I like Disney products, and I enjoy what they're doing. That's not to say that I don't have my fair share of criticisms when it comes to certain things that they do, because what fan wouldn't have some sort of criticisms? That's what fans are nowadays, people with criticisms. But that being said,
do you have stock in Disney too? I mean, at this rate, like,
no, I do not have stock in Disney. Not that I haven't thought about it. No, but the thing is, I'm going to have a lot to say about Disney and what Disney is going to be offering, because I'm very invested in what they do as a company, and I'm very interested in seeing what they do. Now, the same thing can be said about another service that we'll talk about very soon in the future, actually in our next episode, which we'll talk about later. But I'm very interested in certain content companies, and have been before some of these streaming services actually existed. So, Tony, what is your history with Disney?
Not like yours. So I'm a millennial, and like every other millennial, I was force-fed the animated movies, and I really didn't care for them. So that was like my first exposure. All my friends were going to Disney World, and yet I was too poor to go. So that was another knock-on thing for Disney for me. But thankfully, I tend to like them more when they came out with a bunch of like superhero movies that I enjoyed. Seeing Iron Man for the first time, just didn't see some CGI like I had before. Okay, technically at that time Disney had not owned Marvel, but essentially they have. Yeah, I've enjoyed all the superhero movies and how kind of Disney/Marvel has brought them to the mainstream, and which means that it's kind of given license for other companies to really go in on comic book movies besides just Batman and Superman, and I guess Spider-Man. So that's been fun. They bought Star Wars, Lucasfilm, and so it's nice to see that franchise getting back. I love Star Wars a lot. Instead of growing up and watching, cartoons, I grew up watching Star Wars, and so it's nice to see more Star Wars, more Jedi, more lightsabers, make more lightsaber sound effects while I'm at work doing whatever. So yeah, my relationship with Disney is a lot more casual than yours is.
To be fair, I don't know that a lot of other people would be as invested as I would be. I'm sure, I know that there are people, diehard Disney fans, and there's certainly more people out there that are diehard Disney fans, more so than I am. But today we're here to talk about Disney Plus, and as a company, this has been an idea that kind of has, I wouldn't say it's been around for a very long time. It was announced back in 2016 that Disney had acquired a minority stake in BAMTech, which was a spin-out of the Major League Baseball's advanced media streaming technology business, and this was for $1 billion. At the time, it was very understood amongst the tech industry that this was a play to get into the streaming side of things, but at the time, people weren't looking at it as a large picture thing. They were specifically focused on how Disney was going to apply this to a company like ESPN, which they also own, and how they could make ESPN a more streaming service so that people who were slowly cutting the cord and getting out of the cable side of things with their television providers, they could still have access to ESPN, still have access to plenty of different sports games and Sports Center and everything that comes along with ESPN. And that was the assumption. Well, Disney had much bigger plans. Outside of the fact that they were going to apply this to ESPN, which they ended up doing, they ended up applying it to ESPN, and they launched ESPN Plus, which is available now by itself for $4.99 per month. And then as a part of that, you get everything that you would normally get as part of your normal cable package that includes ESPN channels. But they actually kind of used ESPN Plus as kind of like a trial run for Disney Plus. Not that they had already announced that Disney Plus was coming, but they kind of tested and worked out a lot of the kinks with ESPN Plus. In December of 2017, that's when they announced that they were going to be acquiring 21st Century Fox, and this was basically to continue to bolster their content portfolio so that they could have even more content to offer for the eventual streaming service. Eventually, it was announced that the service would be named Disney Plus. This was announced just over a year ago, back in November of 2018, and that it would launch in late 2019. They ended up having a special event that they announced exactly when it would be launching, the pricing structure, as well as what countries it would eventually roll out to. And the intent is that they plan on having a year international rollout by the end of 2020. There's a bunch of places that will be launching right away in 2019 outside of the US, and then there will be other countries that will be being added in early 2020, and then, like I said, eventually their plan is to roll it completely out through the end of 2020 to an entire international market, which in turn makes them a pretty huge competitor to Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, for those outside of the US who are actually subscribed to Amazon Prime, and then as well as Apple TV, which will launch just under 2 weeks before Disney Plus. Now, all of that said, so let's talk about pricing. So pricing for Disney Plus is going to be $6.99 per year, or $70, or $6.99 per month if you pay at a monthly rate, or you can pay upfront for an entire year for $70 and save yourself just a little bit of money. You'll save a couple months worth if you subscribe for a year. They also were running special deals for a variety of different pre-existing Disney customers, people who had pass annual passes to the parks, the D23 members. They were offering different discounts where if you signed up for 2 or 3 years, you got a significant discount. So basically to lock you in for an extended amount of time. And really Disney's way of doing, or the reason they're doing this, is to, get a good idea of a baseline amount of subscribers before the service actually launches. A lot of these pre-orders went live at the end of August and beginning of September, and they've been rolling out a variety of other special pre-order advance purchases to basically entice people to buy before the service actually launches. So the intent is that Disney Plus will offer a variety of different content. They will offer a wide variety of Disney classic animation films, Disney live action films. They'll have Marvel films on there. They'll have Star Wars films. They'll have National Geographic, which is one of the companies that they acquired as part of the Fox deal. And then they'll also have a variety of other content on there as well that doesn't fall into the categories I've already described. But the thing is, they're going to have a massive amount of content because they have 80 plus years of content that they've been producing that they can put on the service. Now, not all of it is going to be available right away. There's certain Marvel movies that won't be available day one because of they're currently tied up with other licensing rights. But when it comes to certain companies like Pixar, everything's going to be on there day one outside of Toy Story 4, which is, I mean, it's only been in theater. It was in theaters at the end of June, so it hasn't been out that long. But that'll eventually be on there too. All the Star Wars films that have, from the first two trilogies, Rogue One, a lot of those films are going to be on there. I think the only one that's not is Solo. I think that one's the only one that's tied up for a little while. But the idea is that outside of that, they're also going to be creating a massive amount of original content. Day one, they're going to be releasing The Mandalorian, which is a film set in the Star Wars universe. They're eventually going to be rolling out, I think they've announced up to this point, I think like 6 to 8 different Marvel series over the course of the next couple years. They have different Pixar shorts and Pixar animated movie or animated shows coming. They have live action remakes of Lady and the Tramp that will be available on day one. There's a variety of different projects that they've announced because they are all about it. According to a report from Variety, which this link will be in the thing, but this was going back to January of 2018, Disney is diving completely headfirst into the streaming world because supposedly they are looking to spend at minimum, at least in the first with the first 6 months worth of content that's coming, somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 million on content, and that's not to license anything because they're not licensing anything. Everything that they have is theirs, so they're not paying for anything like that. But they're going to be spending $500 million for the original content that you're going to find on the service. So that's any live action films like The Lady and the Tramp. There's also a Anna Kendrick and Bill Hader film that's coming out called Noel, a Christmas film that's coming out right around the time of launch. The Mandalorian, which supposedly the 10 episodes, each episode has a budget of about $15 million, which is an insane amount of money. That can obviously eat up a huge chunk of that content budget because that's $150 million. It's over a fifth of the entire amount that they are spending on original content for the launch and the foreseeable months afterwards. All that being said, Disney Plus, a lot of industry experts are pegging it as the true competition for Netflix. And I guess the question that I want to present is, do you see Disney Plus as a true competitor for Netflix? Or do you feel like it's going to take a little while before that really is the case?
I feel out of all the new streaming services, Disney Plus has the potential to really throw Netflix off its game. I think that Disney Plus, I think it's going to be an instant hit. I think they're going to get a lot of subscribers. I think that the subscriber growth is going to go up. I think that the people who sign up will keep their subscriptions. Because, a lot of times people will get a subscription and then for the first month, or if it's like a 3-month trial or a year trial, they'll test it out, but if they don't like it, then whatever. So their subscriber churn rate, should be pretty low in comparison. I think Apple's will be pretty high. If you want to compare and contrast, I think Apple's, churn rate is going to be a lot higher than Disney Plus's, Disney's. I think with the mix of their back catalog, Fox's back catalog, their Disney's new content for, basically hits all the age ranges, kids, teens, adults, whatever. Slew of content for, the whole entire age range. I think it's a great start. The properties that they have, they're able to create content. It's not just one of those a one-off type things. It's okay, I have the Star Wars franchise. And then from there, okay, we can keep creating new Star Wars things, Hey, remember the Old Republic stuff? From a long time ago, yeah, we'll just make a whole universe set 40,000, before everything else. So you have a whole lot of room to play with. Same thing with Marvel. You have all the comics that have been made from all time, and you just pick a story from there. Like, it doesn't even have to be like a super well known hero. They can do something more grounded, something that you wouldn't even know is a comic book superhero, but it could be that. It's just endless. They bought these franchises, and that will sustain them growth. Like they bought Pixar, they bought Lucasfilm, they bought Marvel, they bought Fox, which Fox, brings with them like the Alien franchise, the Avatar franchise, the Kingsman franchise, and then like Planet of the Apes, and other ones that I probably failed to mention. So they've done really well for themselves in terms of how they strategized their contracts. And I think Disney was the first true creator out of all the big creators to see, okay, streaming is the next big thing. Let's write our contracts in a way so that we can get out of these long-term deals. And then from there, let's build our own streaming service. And they have done that. So a couple years ago, you had AT&T, who bought Warner Brothers. You also had Comcast, which bought NBC Universal. Those are two big ISPs, internet service providers. And people are like, well, what's going to happen with Disney? Disney has been very successful on their own. They're a true media company. There's no ISP that's kind of funding them. And so I think the Fox deal is at the end of a bunch of really good ideas to, okay, we have decent content ourselves. How are we going to beat these other companies? By new content and an extensive backlog so that people binge, right? Because Netflix, the key is, can I watch The Office? That's awesome. I like new content, but, when things get tough, I'm going to come and watch The Office, or I'm going to watch Friends. When you look at Disney's purchases, they really all about getting IP that can sustain growth. Their strategy over these past 10 years is, I think, fantastic. I think Bob Iger has done an amazing job, and I think that Disney is prime for the future. I think Disney Plus is going to stay. I think it's going to be the most successful new service. I think that it's going to scare Netflix. There are some investors who are worried for Netflix because, Disney's low price and their great content and their extensive backlog is really going to force Netflix to up its game. And the thing that Disney has versus Netflix is, Netflix is cranking out new content all the time, but Disney has big brands. I mean, all the things I just said, Star Wars, Marvel, all the animated shows that the kids are going to flock to, like they have big names, and big names get views. Even if the movies might not be good, they're going to get their views, and they're going to get people to subscribe. So, out of all the new players, I think Disney Plus is going to be the new one. And I think in a couple of years, Disney Plus is going to be at the top, especially if they do more interesting things with like ESPN, because ESPN, it's always been a subscriber type thing. So you have to pay for it. For your cable, you have to pay a subscription fee essentially. And then they also get advertising revenue. And so it's like they've already been doing this with ESPN, and so it'd be interesting. I love sports, so I'd kind of love a cool package between ESPN and Disney all merged into one. But anyway, I'll finish my love for Disney Plus right now. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, and the thing to keep in mind is that this is just, a lot of people don't realize this, but when you get out of a company like Netflix and Apple and Amazon, that are tech companies by nature and have gotten into producing content for their services, Disney is the reverse of that. They are content creators who are getting into this streaming service side of things. And it becomes a new method for them to distribute content. It gives a whole nother avenue to have more content available for the fans of these properties. And what's really interesting about all of this is that ever since Disney started purchasing some of the bigger companies like Marvel and Lucasfilm, ever since that happened, when you look at the amount of other films that Disney produces outside of the big blockbusters like their live action remakes of the animated films, their animated films, the Pixar, the Marvel, the Lucasfilm, all that stuff, when you look outside of what they actually release that's not related to those specific things, there isn't that much left. Disney has cut back a lot on the smaller productions of the smaller films that generally are take risks and are hit and miss. They don't really have a lot of property or a lot of movies that they release like that. And while the acquisition of Fox will allow a side of the company to still be producing some independent films and more lower budget films and things like that, Disney Plus gives the ability to have that happen for a smaller scale. We hear all the time about how Netflix spends certain amounts of money to acquire films that are, at film festivals and things like that, and they acquire them. And while they might have a really limited run in theaters, they release on the streaming service. When we talked about Netflix, we brought up the movie Triple Frontier. It was a Ben Affleck movie that came out earlier this year. Netflix made a big deal about it, and when they were talking back in July, their subscriber numbers and stuff at the end of Q2, they specifically were bringing up that Triple Frontier over the course of just a short amount of time. I think it was within the first couple weeks or the first month that the film had been out, over 55 million households had seen the film. And that was a big deal to them because they acquired the film for somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think it was around 100 million, maybe it was a little bit more. But to be fair, that movie should not have cost that much money if it was actually being produced by, a normal, smaller studio. But Netflix wanted it for their service because, as we know, Netflix's model is create content to bring people in, and once you get them to be paying on average $10 a month for their content, that in the long run will help. Disney, on the other hand, they can create content that is on a lower scale, but release it for their streaming service, and it gives people a higher value to pay for the service and continue to pay for the service. And while it's a similar situation with Netflix, Disney has been producing content, but recently hasn't been producing the lower budgeted content. And that's not to say that, like, when they released The Mandalorian, obviously, like I said earlier, it's $15 million an episode. That is nothing to scoff at. That's like Game of Thrones budget. That's not anything remotely small whatsoever. They can produce stuff like The Lady and the Tramp live action remake. Could something like that actually have worked in theaters? It probably would have done somewhere in the neighborhood of something like the Dumbo live action, which didn't break $1 billion. It made money. It was successful by any measure of box office success, but it didn't, make any, break any records or anything like that. So if they produce this smaller content and they can distribute it on their own service, there's a lot of cost that is reduced from having to do that. There's a lot of cost that they don't have to deal with by having something released in theaters, and they can make more money on it. So I think that if you look at Netflix and you say, well, there's a reason why they're buying this content, there's a reason why they're paying all this money for this content that isn't even their own, that they're not originally producing themselves. There's a lot of money that, to bring in people who like those properties. There's a reason why they spent so much money on Friends and The Office for so many years. And it was because that stuff brings people in. Well, Disney has a massive library that is going to be bringing people in. And if they can expand that library by creating more original content based off of those properties that people already really appreciate, it's just going to keep bringing more people in. And of course, all this original content that Disney is making, while obviously things can be hit or miss, it will still have that Disney content approval, like seal of approval, in the sense of, that it's not going to get made and it's going to be bad or poor quality. There's going to be at least a standard of quality that will exist because it's Disney. We talked about Netflix kind of putting out a lot of content and kind of seeing what would work and seeing what doesn't work, and some of the shows don't work and some of them don't get a second season. And I don't see that being very likely I don't see it being very likely. If anything, I think shows are going to be so popular that Disney originally planned on it not having a second season, and they're going to end up being in a situation where the stuff is so popular, you're going to see that happening. A lot of the Marvel stuff, because they have so much stuff planned out for the next 3 years, you're going to see the Marvel stuff. I think there's going to be certain series that are going to be real big and be really, really take off really well with the fans, and Disney's going to be sitting in a situation where they're having to do what they're doing currently with the Marvel films, where you have like the success of Black Panther, but you're not going to see a Black Panther film for another 4 or 5 years because of the limitations on what they can actually release. So go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The thing that interests me, that I think sets Disney Plus apart, is that you have these big franchises, Star Wars and Marvel, which already have, cinematic universes that have been played out on the big screen. So yeah, you get, box office money, that's fun, whatever. But you have these established brands that are so huge, and now that Disney Plus has their streaming service, right? They don't have to, try to make sure that, once a week they get their show out on ABC, and it's fine, and it's hard to like kind of coordinate. Disney Plus allows a direct, way for Lucasfilm and Marvel and other big franchises to create extra content and other content that syncs up with the main universe, but it's like real. It's all connected. It's all part of continuity. And before, like, you'd have like either like a couple Marvel shows that like kind of claimed they were, but they even weren't. Marvel Television has not always kind of communicated well with Marvel Studios, but now Marvel Studios is cranking out all these TV shows, and the stuff that happens in the shows is important for the movies. The stuff that's in the movies is important for the shows. The Mandalorian is, and they're making a new series with the guy from
Cassian Andor.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, like, those series are a part of the Star Wars canon, and it's all going to be, referenced. And that's crazy. That's cool. Like, all right, I just watched like Star Wars Episode 9. I'm going to watch it. There's some other Star Wars thing that isn't continuity. Like, oh yeah, like in between this Marvel series and the Marvel movie, I can go watch this like Hawkeye TV series that's not like some other actor playing Hawkeye. It's the actual actor from the movie playing Hawkeye. That's kind of crazy. Usually movie stars don't kind of like translate to TV stars and go back and forth, It's either they stay in one, and that's kind of the lane. So that's the cool part about Disney Plus, is it blurs, it like removes the line between movies, movies and television, theatrical releases and then cable content. And it's like taking down the divide and merging them together so that you can get a true like media experience between big screen and small screen all at the same time.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that the other thing that's going to make at least part of the Disney Plus stuff successful is that Disney has this massive reach when it comes to merchandise. You can't really go into any store and not see something that's owned by Disney appearing somewhere. If it's not Disney Princesses or Star Wars or Marvel or the Pixar characters, or the Muppets, or classic other Disney animation, there's Disney stuff everywhere. You go to Target, you go to Walmart, you're going to see the stuff. There are toys in the toy aisles. There's, you go into, here's a good thing. It's that time of the year. Go into the Halloween section of your local store and see how many different characters you can see that are owned by Disney. Trust me, there's a lot of them. But the point is, Disney is very good about having a lot of merchandise. And the one thing that I think is really interesting to keep in mind is that a lot of money that Disney makes, it comes from merchandise. So you can bet your butt that the content that Disney Plus is offering will have merchandise tied to it. And I think that's the one thing that is going to differ them from a lot of these other properties until we get to some of the other content first producers before they were streaming services. Because when you look at Amazon and Netflix and even Apple to a degree, even though Apple's not out yet, when you look at Amazon and Netflix, they've had content that's been popular, but you're not going to see a lot of merchandise out there for their shows. Netflix, it took the second season of Stranger Things to release before they actually started to have merchandise for Stranger Things. And Stranger Things was a type of show that was very popular with a lot of people, and it unfortunately just did not have a lot of merchandise out there for people to be purchasing. When you're a fan of a show, you want to be able to show that you're a fan. And when you don't have a lot of merchandising deals in place, like when it comes to Netflix making merchandise deals for Stranger Things, you don't have you're not fulfilling the need that some fans want. Disney, on the other hand, knows exactly how to do that. For example, The Mandalorian is launching day one on Disney Plus, and they already have Lego sets lined up for The Mandalorian. They already have Funko Pops for it. They're not going to be holding back. When you see some of the Marvel series come out, you see some of the Pixar series, the animated series that are coming out, you're going to see merchandise for this stuff. No doubt about it. And Disney's going to make a bunch of money from these properties that they're releasing on their own private content. And then that content, that merchandise that's out there is also going to be advertising that content that's available on the service. And that's a big deal because it is just happening recently that you're starting to see a lot of merchandise for some of the stuff that Netflix is producing, because it took them a long time to, work out the deals and the licensing things for a lot of those shows that they have, where Disney, they've been doing this for a long time. They are not new to the merchandise game, and they're going to be making a ton of money off of the stuff that they put on Disney Plus. So I think that's a big deal to consider, and it's something that, while they're going to make money off of the subscribers, they're going to make a lot of money off the merchandise that's associated with these properties that they're putting on their individual service. The last thing I want to mention before we wrap up this episode is the other thing to keep in mind is that Disney actually has a controlling interest in Hulu. And recently it was announced that Disney will be offering a bundle of Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, and Hulu for a price of $12.99, which is still very comparable to Netflix's price and gives you a lot of different content that you would not otherwise get. You're going to get a lot of sports that you're not going to get anywhere on Netflix. You're going to get a lot of the stuff that Hulu offers, their original content, their content that they have with ads, and then you're going to get all the Disney Plus stuff for $13 a month. And that's a pretty decent deal when it comes to the comparable offerings from Netflix in general. And that is obviously designed to specifically target people who are already paying more, but offer them a lot more content. Disney was already underpricing Netflix with the price of their Disney Plus service only being $6.99 a month compared to the average of $10 over at Netflix. But announcing this bundle is going to be significant for a lot of people who are looking to add a ton of or have access to a ton of content. The other thing about Hulu is that while Disney Plus will be the focus of a lot of the family-friendly content that they're offering, Hulu will be focusing on a lot of the Fox properties that are more adult-oriented, rated R, higher in the PG-13s, stuff like Alien, or I imagine Planet of the Apes could end up over, something like that could end up over there, but also some of the more adult-oriented Marvel stuff. They've announced 4 animated shows that are going to be coming to Hulu over the course of time. They did announce 2 original series for Marvel, one of which has been canceled. It's not moving forward any further than it already has, but Hulu is going to have its own slew of original content that will also be being produced by Disney. And I believe the deal in place right now is that NBC Universal, who's the only other, is the minority owner of, has a minority stake in Hulu, they will be selling off their 30% over a certain amount of time back to Disney, and Disney will basically own Hulu outright. The thing that matters about Hulu is that Hulu has 28 million subscribers currently, so that's a pretty big deal considering Hulu, the ad-ran service is the ad-supported service is $5.99 a month. 28 million people already subscribe to it. So once Disney completely owns that, they're going to be making a bunch of money off of Hulu, on top of making a bunch of money off of ESPN Plus, on top of making money off of everybody who's going to be jumping onto Disney Plus when it's coming too. And if you combine them, you're saving yourself some money, but Disney is going to have a lot of eyeballs glued to their content because there's a lot of content that you're going to be able to see. So it really does, when you combine all of that, it really does give Netflix a run for their money, in my opinion. All right, so with that being said, that is going to wrap up this episode. Next episode, we're going to be talking about HBO Max because that is, at least at this point, the one that we assume is coming next. Peacock is also another one that's coming, and they've announced they're dropping in spring 2020. HBO Max was originally announced to launch in beta at the end of 2019, so that's why we're going to be covering that one next. But outside of that, we'll be covering HBO Max next time around. With that being said, if you are listening to this podcast, wherever you are listening to it, if you're listening to it on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're listening to it on any of the podcasting services, SoundCloud, any of the podcasting apps that you listen to, please take a moment to give us a review. A 5-star review is always greatly appreciated. Anywhere you're listening to this, getting our name out there, greatly appreciate. You can follow us on Twitter at Streaming War, and then we have links to our other social media. We do have a Discord server that you can check out where we're constantly posting news articles dealing with a lot of the streaming services and stuff that we'll be covering once we get to the point where we are covering current news and we get out of these current state of episodes. We're going to be diving straight into the news, and a lot of that stuff that we post over there will be being discussed on a normal basis over, in future episodes. In addition to that, you can support us on Patreon. We have some different rewards available for those of you who are interested in supporting us on Patreon. The link is over on the site at the top, and the site is thestreamingwars.io. So if you're so inclined, check out all the different things that we have to offer, and you can follow Tony and myself on Twitter. Our links are over on the website as well. And with that being said, that is everything for this episode. This is Dustin for Tony. This has been The Streaming Wars. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.